Here are unknown facts about each Akatsuki member. 1. Pain, Nagato. Nagato's Rinnegan was not fully developed until he was around 20 years old. Before that, his eyes were not as powerful, and he relied more on his physical strength and ninja skills. In fact, Nagato's Rinnegan was so powerful that it allowed him to control the 6 paths of pain, a technique that granted him immense power and control over his surroundings. However, this power came at a great cost, as Nagato had to sacrifice his own body and well-being in order to use the Rinnegan to its full potential. 2. Tobi, Obito Uchiha. Obito's mask was designed to suppress his emotions and prevent him from feeling pain. However, it also had a negative effect on his mental health, causing him to become increasingly detached and unstable. In fact, Obito's mask was so effective at suppressing his emotions that he was able to completely conceal his true identity and intentions, even from his fellow Akatsuki members. However, this detachment also made it difficult for Obito to form genuine connections with others, leading to a deep sense of loneliness and isolation. 3. Itachi Uchiha. Itachi's Sharingan was so powerful that he could use it to manipulate people's memories and perceptions. He used this ability to make people believe that he had killed his clan, when in reality, he had spared them. In fact, Itachi's Sharingan was so advanced that he was able to create complex illusions that were almost indistinguishable from reality. However, this power came at a great cost, as Itachi had to constantly struggle to maintain control over his Sharingan, lest it consume him completely. 4. Kisame Hashigaki. Kisame's Samahata sword was not just a powerful tool, but also a sentient being that could absorb and nullify ninjutsu. Kisame had a deep bond with Samahata, which made him even more formidable in battle. In fact, Samahata was so intelligent that it was able to communicate with Kisame telepathically, allowing them to coordinate their attacks and defenses with ease. However, this bond also made Kisame vulnerable to Samahata's influence, causing him to become increasingly aggressive and unpredictable. 5. Sasori. Sasori's puppet body was designed to be highly resistant to damage, but it also had a weakness: it was vulnerable to fire. Sasori's use of fireproof materials and his ability to control his puppet body's temperature made him less vulnerable to this weakness. In fact, Sasori's puppet body was so advanced that it was able to mimic human-like movements and expressions, making it almost indistinguishable from a real person. However, this level of complexity also made the puppet body increasingly difficult to control, causing Sasori to struggle with its maintenance and upkeep. 6. Deidara. Deidara's explosion release technique was not just a simple ninjutsu, but a complex art form that required precise control over his chakra and the explosive materials. Deidara's talent for this technique was unmatched, and he was known for his ability to create intricate and beautiful explosions. In fact, Deidara's explosion release was so powerful that it was able to destroy entire buildings and landscapes, making him a formidable opponent on the battlefield. However, this power also came at a great cost, as Deidara had to constantly struggle to maintain control over his explosions, lest they consume him completely. 7. Haiden. Haiden's immortality was not just a result of his jutsu, but also a result of his unique physiology. His body was highly resistant to damage, and he could regenerate from even the most severe injuries. However, this immortality came at a cost, as Haiden was unable to feel pain or emotions. In fact, Haiden's immortality was so complete that he was able to survive even the most extreme conditions, including being blown up, crushed, or decapitated. However, this level of invulnerability also made Haiden increasingly arrogant and dismissive of others, causing him to underestimate his opponents and ultimately leading to his downfall. 8. Kakuzu. Kakuzu's body was composed of 5 distinct elements, each with its own unique properties and abilities. His earth element granted him superhuman strength, his water element allowed him to heal from injuries, and his fire element gave him the ability to manipulate flames. In fact, Kakuzu's elemental composition was so complex that he was able to adapt to almost any situation, making him a formidable opponent in battle. However, this level of complexity also made Kakuzu